everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's show, we're going to take a look at a bunch of different trains that I've caught along the old ACL's main line between Orlando and Jacksonville. Now, it's certainly not the busiest of lines in Duval County, but this A line can get some pretty cool movements if you get lucky. It's a cool Saturday morning, and with a busy day of exploring and relaxing ahead, I make the drive out westbound on I-295 and across the St. Johns River to the A-line at Yukon siding. Usually the north end or just north of the siding would be my morning photo spot for an approaching southbound, but with the cold front bringing along some storms and subsequent cloud coverage, I'd pull into south end Yukon just before 8 a.m. on the backlit side and set up for PO 91. We're at milepost A655 on the dot here at South End Yukon, which, as many of you know by now, is the first siding south of downtown Jacksonville on this old ACL main to Tampa. At 10,140 feet, Yukon is around 2 miles long, the normal siding length for railroads in 2025, yet it's perfectly straight, which is why when a late Amtrak 91 would call a clear at the north end, we could easily see the approaching train from miles away. Yukon is also where passenger trains can notch up to make up for some lost time before slowing back down to 40 miles an hour as they enter Orange Park and another wide curve that banks the railroad away from the St. Johns River. Today's 91 would be running about an hour late, coming by with the triple header as railroads say, or 3 engines up front, led by 2 P42s and some other engine that's not even working. Four coaches, a cafe, 4 sleepers, and a baggage car would make up this morning's consist and send me packing north up the line a few miles to McGirts Creek. Six miles north of Yukon at the A649.1 is the drawbridge over the modern Ortega River, a branch of the St. Johns that continues north to Normandy Village and south to Ortega, a neighborhood south of Yukon along this same A-line. Since the St. Johns bends back towards the coast here, the railroad follows suit, crossing McGirts in the process and utilizing a manned drawbridge, one that's guarded by 2 signals, both with red C markers. Like ABS signals, these installments only turn on when a train is in the block. However, unlike their ABS siblings, a train crew will treat the signal like an absolute signal, meaning if it's red, the crew will bring the train to a stop. The C marker lets a train know that if the signal here were to be red and the bridge is in place, they can continue at restricted speed with a man on the ground to make sure that the bridge is locked in place and readied for their move across. That certainly is a what-if situation though, as the man at McGirts lines and locks the bridge in place for each train, automatically giving trains a high green signal here, one that trains like Amtrak 97 can pass at 45 miles an hour as they roll south towards Yukon, where a northbound will be waiting for them there. Like I said, the aforementioned cloud coverage would eliminate most of those hard shadows that morning light brings, which would give me a chance to put up the drone for a shot as Amtrak 97 continues south, meeting EO41 at Yukon, who'd get signals to depart just moments after 97's passing. On this last Saturday of September, however, there'd be plenty of pleasure craft, so the tender would briefly raise his span to allow the water traffic to clear before EO41 would come into view, with 3 locomotives pulling almost 2 miles of empty coal out of OUC. EO41 is the empty shipment of coal out of Orlando, a familiar train for this A-line on the weekends now, coming out of a pre-dawn departure this Saturday morning and routed up the A-line. A straight shot for this Jacksonville-bound crew as they dodge 3 southbound Amtraks on their way north. Between the leader's K5HLA horn and the gloomy noontime that awaits, I call it a morning after EO41 and mosey back into Jacksonville to explore downtown and some other pretty areas I've yet to see. But I'd come back out to the A-line just a couple weeks later on another cloudy but this time cold Friday as local L711 prepares to depart. A mile south of McGirts Creek is the distant to Yukon signal at the A650.8, and my photo spot for our southbound local this dreary AM. It's just before 8 a.m., but it doesn't look it, as L711 gets the drawbridge down for his movement just around the corner from my post. Between the cold wind and the sporadic rain, this shot would be quite the way to start the morning, but it would be well worth it, as L711 rounds the bend with SD40-2, number 8066, leading a small train for Palatka. With a full day of work ahead of this crew at Pecan Yard near Botswick, 7-Eleven would pass with green signals to his terminal as the previous night, issues around Washington, D.C. would delay both morning Silver Service Amtrak trains. So I'd break off for some breakfast and some more exploring, this time around McGirts Creek and the quaint Ortega village. Originally named Ortega Park in the early 20th century, Ortega Village was expanded in 1965 when the city of Jacksonville filled an acre of submerged land and built a bulkhead along its length. Today we're standing on that very ground at Stockton Park, named after John Stockton, the centuries past president of the Ortega Company, this subdivision's developer. Mr. Stockton is best remembered for his devoted public service amidst the Yellow Fever in 1888 and the Great Fire of 1901, now honored to the public with this park, which overlooks the St. John's and NAS Jacks to the southeast and Jacksonville's broad skyline to the north. I'd spend some time here, walking around Ortega Village, which would still be half asleep this dark morning, before heading back around the block to the A-line, as Amtrak 91 would arrive and finally depart from his Jacksonville station stop. I really wouldn't allot much time to pick a spot for this guy, so back to McGirts Creek I'd go, now on the south side of the river as the span would lower. Amtrak 41, the southbound Floridian, would show his face with another P42 duo leading another charger. Another triple header, but completely different consist from the last time. From McGirt, I'd head into town, as there'd be a couple of stores I'd need to stop by before going any further. So after about 30 minutes doing that, I'd find myself staring at a high green along the SP line at South and Carnegie, as IO36 departs Moncrief. We're on the west side of Jacksonville, now along the Seaboard's line between Jacksonville and Baldwin, within what some call the Duval Triangle. With Jack's Ramp to our west and Moncrief to our east, this stretch of track sees plenty of intermodal traffic, from arriving intermodal trains from up north to yard switchers serving the large customer base around here, to intermodal power sets coming out of Moncrief for Duval to pick up their northbound train. Well, as you can probably tell by the sun on me, this day has turned absolutely beautiful. The sun's out, it's in the low 70s, and it's quite windy. I'm at Civic Club Road, about a mile north of Dinsmore, and I'm waiting on an I-137 that's coming south from Callahan, but there's a headlight to the south, so we're gonna turn around and see whatever that is. If you didn't hear everything I said thanks to those strong winds this day, I've moved up the A-line past Moncrief and just north of Dinsmore at Civic Club Road, the next road crossing north from Trout River Road, where that headlight would soon start disappearing into Jack's ramp. That power set would be I-026 coming out of Moncrief Yard and heading to the ramp to grab their train, as I-137 speeds south towards Moncrief. Looking back south, that I-026 has completed the same maneuver that we caught the I-036 doing earlier, just now on the north end of the yard. This is another train that's power starts in Moncrief and heads up to Duval for their train, hence the medium approach lined for 26's backing move, which will take them down Dinsmore Connection and into the yard. North another mile or so on the same A-line is milepost A634, and even 9 miles south of the junction at Callahan, and where an original ACL milepost installment still resides. These triangular posts are interesting as they not only depict the mileposts of the parallel line, but also mileage from the nearest major terminal. Since we're practically in Jacksonville by now, the ACL carved S for Savannah, which is about 160 miles to our north. Installments like these can be found all along the A-line, with Orlando area S's for Sanford and PT for Port Tampa south of that. It doesn't matter for Amtrak 97, however, as he speeds in an attempt to make up for almost 2 hours of delays, a number that will only grow as he continues south to Miami. Well, the beauty of the day has gone back to rain, unfortunately. We do have another train coming though, and I'm moving up the line to another crossing here on the A-line. I-195 is coming south. It's a newer intermodal train to Jacksonville, and it should be going at a pretty brisk pace. So we'll explain more about that once we see it, but for now, see if we get set up and not get too wet either. Known as Fiend Street in the address book, the railroad calls this crossing and its nearby pair of ABS signals Red Dog to honor the old hound that used to lie by the tracks decades ago. Nowadays, Red Dog is the pathway to just 2 homes, both of which having plenty of signage protecting their private property, so I'd make sure to stay on the public and west side of the tracks as I-195 approaches. This short but daily train, nonetheless, is new for us over here, just recently added this past month, as a Bedford Park to Jacksonville intermodal train running daily via Evansville and Birmingham. I guess I-025 and I-026 have just gotten a little bit too long for comfort for CSX, so an extra train has been added to take the daily straggler traffic to Jackson back, utilizing the I-196 symbol for northbounds. From the A-line, I'd hear the dispatcher give the 195 signals to enter Duval Yard, although he'd only get 10 minutes to do so, as NS would have a train of their own to cross into town who'd be approaching quickly. So I'd relocate around the corner to Spalding, just a 3-minute drive from Dinsmore, as NS29F approaches, with a nice consist of an SD70 Ace, GE, and Jeep 60 leading the charge this afternoon. 29F is the Norfolk Southern's version of I-025, one of the highest priority trains on the system, running from Chicago to Jacksonville. This one, though, running into downtown and over to the FEC, where they'll drop the train and pick up a northbound cut from the FEC, which will go back north as NS 287 later this evening. With 29F out of the way, it was back to the A line for me at Dennis Street, as I heard L711 coming back from Palatka now, just before 3 p.m. today. With that SD40 now leading Long Hood forward, I'd settle for a slow shot with the 643 milepost, as 711 wraps up his 8-hour day of work. With L711 tucked away into Moncrief now, the yardmaster would allow a yard job coming from the SP line to enter, as Y102 approaches from the FEC. I'd walk down to the south end of Duke's Crossing at South TY, as the sun starts to peek through the gloomy afternoon clouds. 102 is bringing back about half of the traffic that CSX handles from FEC on a daily, as this is one of 2 daily trains that CSX sends out there, with this Y102 job running after 3 p.m. today, and Y201, the next CSX job, departing around 6 p.m. tonight. These trains, albeit slow, will always impress me, as Y102's solo SD40-3 pulls a cut of almost 2 miles of intermodal over the St. Johns River and back onto the north side of town, before dropping most of his constants at Moncrief and returning to Duval to end the day. About an hour passes and I'm back at Yukon, where our day started, as P001 rolls north. This is the entire point I'd be out today, as with new leadership for the company would also come a tour of Florida and the bottom of CSX's system. Like my friend Dakota says though, this train is really a pig with lipstick, as although it's very cool and a sharp train to catch, nothing good ever comes from it. The railroad's annual property tax is estimated and measured by how much trackage they operate on, which is why so many small and rarely used spurs, runaround tracks, and sidings are consistently ripped out, as it lowers that measurement, which lowers the bill for CSX. This train is basically a physical check of trackage for these greedy executives who can easily pull the plug on any line they deem as unnecessary or not cost effective. It's such a pity, because it looks so pretty.
Look for CSXC engine 1 as it's clear, north end of Yukon, north on the main, out. CSX equipment defect detector milepost 652.4, no defects, total axle 7.6, end of transmission. 109, look for CSX1, looking good, Yukon DD, out.
The day would end here at Yukon, as I'd pack up for home and some dinner after quite the eventful day along the A-line. I hope you all enjoyed this one as much as I enjoyed filming and editing it. There's plenty more to come, so stay tuned. But until we meet again somewhere out there trackside, this is Christian from Multicolor Films, end of transmission.